Hello, everyone, and welcome to Uncivil Law, where we learn through the misfortunes of others. As always, I hope you'll enjoy this live legal education content, and today will be the day I earn your subscription. For today's story, we are talking about what I, at least, did not see coming, an unexpected settlement between women's soccer and the U.S. Soccer Federation, where the women's soccer team will be getting paid an additional $24 million from somewhere. And we're here to discuss this with the person who, perhaps more than anyone else on LawTube, has made this story known. It is none other than our friend, Nate the Lawyer. Hello, Nate the Lawyer. How are you?
What's going on, people? I'm like, make sure I look into the camera. What's going on?
So have you covered all your mirrors with black so you can't look at them? Are you sitting Shiva yet? Because you can't, because there's no more USA Soccer for you to cover.
Yeah, it's gonna be sad. It is pretty sad, but it's the deal is still contingent on them signing the CBA. So maybe that. But yeah, I expected it to come to an end soon now. So it wasn't just like
$24 million.
Well, they have already paid, from what I'm reading now, $9 million in legal fees. So I'm thinking
okay. Yeah, but I just paid $24 million in legal fees. I mean, because I'm right. If I'm the Soccer Federation,
I'm
right.
Yeah, I just, it's weird because I don't know why they did. Like, I understand, like, maybe from both a PR standpoint and a legal standpoint in terms of finances, I understand why you settle. But then on the aspect of being held hostage and a smart men's team thinking, well, shoot, if they just got paid and they were making more, what does that mean for us?
Well, according to the New York Times article, which we may or may not get into while Nate is still here, but there is a paragraph well down in the New York Times article which says that apparently this is all contingent on some sort of unified CBA between the men and women, where they would share all the prize pool for all the money, including, for example, the men's World Cups. So the men are quite literally the only way for this to work. And I said this many times. I'm like, the only way for this to work pragmatically is for the men's and women's teams to essentially merge and you share the money. That's the only way for this to work. And apparently that is the solution they've come upon, because it was in fact the only way for this to work. So, okay. I guess the men are willing to give up the prospect of millions of dollars, even though they have arguably a harder competition, which I'm not allowed to say, but I'm going to anyway, and all the rest of it, because this doesn't make any sense. So yeah,
it's all about feelings, baby. It's all about your feelings,
But I don't even understand it really from a PR standpoint at this point. If I'm the women's, if I'm national soccer, if I'm the National Soccer Federation, I don't understand from a PR point. Because, like, I've already spent the $9 million in legal. I've already got the district court judgment. I've already gotten all the hate in the world. How much more hate am I really getting at this point, to be quite honest? The HBO movie thing has already happened. Like, how much worse can it possibly get for me if I'm the Soccer Federation? Where it's what PR do I really think I'm gaining from this, if any? I was like, I don't know that I'm gaining any PR, but They wussed out, man. They wussed out.
Because essentially what you're doing is everybody's going to look at this as an admission that they were wrong, right? An admission. Hey, you were discriminated against them, and now you finally paid, not knowing, the facts that we know, and it may be that may be the issue too, because we do know the underlying facts. We know the women were paid more. We know what the arguments were. We know why they lost, and most of the unfortunately the dummies out there aren't going to know. They're just going to know the headlines. And when you have ABC, NBC, and all the news media saying they were discriminated against and now they got paid, that's going to be what people hear. The people who listen to us, who are informed, are just a minority of everybody else who's going to be hearing the unfortunately the lies, right? The lies. They are going to be listening to the lies. So
I mean, unsurprised. Well, I guess a little surprising, although I don't know why I should be surprised. But yeah, the national media blatantly, massively misrepresented the story. The men's and women's teams, for those of you who have somehow missed the memo all this time, the men's and women's teams negotiated for different things. They were offered the same structure. at different times, and they were offered different combinations of structures. So there was, we can pay you some money guaranteed. We can pay you some money based on your performance. We can pay you some money based on how many games you play. We can pay you some money based on, various factors of different ways that money is coming in and various ways that you can be rewarded as a person. And this idea, at least, is not foreign. It's the idea basically of a wage or salary on the one hand versus commission on the other hand. And these things are not necessarily like one for one. You can have a relationship where you have both a wage, salary, and commission. You can have both depending on the nature of the business or relationship, or you can only have one, or you can only have the other. For example, in my main day job, I have a wage, salary. I do not have a commission. I do not get paid more or less depending on success or whatever that would be. It doesn't even get measured, right? I just get paid a salary. Or it could be some other way. It could be I get paid. Lawyers do this all the time, for example, in contingency fees. That's kind of what a contingency fee is in many ways. It's like I'm going to risk not getting anything in exchange for 30, 40% plus fees of whatever settlement might occur. But if no settlement occurs and no money comes in, I get nothing. So lawyers do this kind of risk all the time. And it can be somewhere in between as well for lawyers, right? It could be I'm going to take a flat fee. I want $50,000. I want the contingency. I want some blend in between. You can have all kinds of fun arrangements, right, Nate?
Yeah. Well, you know what? I'm just going to call it like it is. I'm not going to be politically correct here. I'm just going to call it like it is. It's bullshit. This is all bullshit. Everything we're talking about. Essentially, we're trying to say it's all bullshit, right?
Yeah,
it's bullshit because the women. Literally, there's nowhere on the planet where you can go into a courtroom except here in the United States and be paid more because of your gender, right? You go in there, you say
the women were already paid more.
And they go and say, we want more than that.
And now they're being paid $4 million more.
And then they double your salary. Thank God for America. This is the greatest country in the world. We're already being paid more than the men. And you know what they did to shut us up? They doubled it. They said, okay, we're going to double what you got paid to shut you up. Thank God for America. If somebody now tells me America's this racist, sexist country, I'm pointing to the U.S. women's soccer lawsuit and saying, well, what the hell are you talking about? That's how racist and sexist we are. We're so sexist that we paid the women double, even though they were getting paid more already, plus full benefits. What more do you want?
I'll tell you what more I want. I want an argument before the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit, Nate. That's what I want. I want these two teams arguing before the Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit. I want an appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court, Nate, on the Equal Pay Act.
Oh, let me share this out.
And all the rest of it that to show whether or not there was. I want the law, Nate, developed. So that's what I want. And I've been deprived.
That ain't happening. It ain't happening.
I know, Nate. I know.
What's not happening is because
I understand.
Because now listen. Now I've been reading up because my video actually I published early, so now I'm getting a lot more facts after it.
Yeah.
But one of the new facts is that there's a contentious election coming up. The former president and the new president, who was a former player, they're running against each other. So I'm thinking she wanted to settle to help her campaign. Right? This was great. Oh, we'll settle to help their campaign.
It's political. Okay, well,
yeah. So I think the politics. I think the politics of the play. And he was one that was like, yo, we're not settling.
Bribe.
Yeah, he's like, yo, we're not settling.
Bribe from the politician back to the members. Okay, it's grift. The other way around. It's reverse grift.
Yeah.
Okay.
And she's a former player, so she's like, and then say, hey, we'll pay you. But at the end of the day, you got to come. The one thing I think that no one can deny is that the women were already getting paid more. They just literally paid them more on top of that. That's it.
That's what the numbers showed, Nate, in the actual facts of
no, come on. You're talking about facts. You are being ridiculous. Take your facts and throw them in the trash because they are not worth anything here. They are not worth
apparently not. Apparently not. And so, yeah, the men and women negotiated for different things. The men and women got paid different things based on that negotiation. The women would have done better under the men's deal, but ironically, the men would have done better under the women's deal, which makes it very hard to show that it's sexism because apparently they're both being discriminated both on the basis of sex at the same time, which is a very weird concept. I didn't even know was possible, which it's not, but okay. And then the women, the contract was running out, and they were offered the same structure again,
Yes.
and they turned it down again, and they renewed the old deal because they want the guarantees. And even in the retrospect of it all, I'm still not sure the women were wrong, because the women got paid during COVID and the women get guaranteed salaries. And I mean, I don't think you can necessarily even say, even in hindsight, they were wrong to make the deal they did, or it was a bad deal.
It was a fantastic deal.
I mean, it included a lot of things. I mean, there's a lot of upsides to those deals. Even in the way it panned out, it's still a pretty good deal.
Listen, let's not even cut it close, right? The COVID year made their deal a tremendously better deal. Just the COVID year alone.
You mean the $4 million versus I forget how much was it the men got paid? Was it $3.5 million instead of $4? What did you say? $3 million instead of $4, Nate?
You said about for the women?
No, for the men. Was it the men got $3 million and the women got $4? Is that what happened during COVID?
No, they got zero. The men got zero. Absolutely nothing.
I don't understand. Zero?
The men got no money. No, because obviously
you mean $1 million. That must be what you mean.
No. I mean nothing, right? Because the men had the men's contract was what's known as a pay to play, right? You play in a game, you get paid. So since COVID killed all the games, the men got absolutely no money.
No, wait, I can do this. Wait a second. So it's pay to play. So the men get paid, let's see, so many dollars per win and so many dollars per tie and so many dollars per loss and so many dollars per things. And so I add all that up times the number of games, which is 0. And I seem to remember something from like second grade when I multiply anything by 0, I seem to remember it results in 0. It's 0. That's what happens. When you just multiply something by 0, okay,
it's always going to be 0.
Yeah. So the women got paid the $4 million, the benefits, the guaranteed salaries, the health care plans, the leave from work, the child care plans, dental, everything else on the face of the earth, guaranteed play time, which is great when there's no games, but we're going to still pay you like you did, and all the rest of it. And the men got paid $0, but the women are the ones that are discriminated against somehow. Nothing makes any sense. The world is broken. Let's discuss this article for the New York Times, which summarizes the issues. And I can be sad that, I mean, I'm like kind of with you, I don't really have an underlying dog in the fight. It's not really that I want women to lose, because I don't know anything about these people. I don't know. I don't watch soccer, men's or women's. I don't really watch sports, period. The only thing I really watch is Clemson football during the fall. That's about it, because I went to Clemson for undergrad. Go Tigers. And so I don't really have a dog in this fight. I just care about the law, and the law seems to favor not this result. So,
well, hey, listen, you got Kim Potter, you got this. It's going to happen. Pull up the New York Times lawsuit. Pull up the New York Times article.
Yeah, we're reading it now. A 6-year fight over equal pay that has pitted key members of the World Cup winning women's soccer team against their sport's national governing body ended on Tuesday morning with a settlement that includes a multi-million-dollar payout to the players and a promise by the federation to equalize pay between men and women's teams, which I think like 10 paragraphs from now they're going to mention is based on the premise that somehow we're going to create a unified CBA to unify all the sharing of all the money, which is the only way this can work. So the men are going to have to give up millions of dollars, which apparently the men are going to agree to, because I seriously doubt the soccer federation would settle with the women if that wasn't a realistic prospect. So apparently the men are willing to give up millions of dollars. Okay. Under the terms of the agreement, the athletes, a group consisting of women's national team players, will share $24 million in payments. The bulk of that figure is back pay. Okay, perhaps more notable, though, at least for the players, the pledge to equalize pay during the men's and women's teams in all competitions, including the World Cup, in the team's next collective bargaining agreement. The gap was once... Yeah, it is impossible, because, and they even go on to say why it's impossible. The bridge was once seen as unbridgeable divide, preventing any sort of settlement. It is, because the men's and women's teams' economics are not the same. They're not paid the same, man. The total amount of money for all the prizes for the women's World Cup is $4 million. That's all the money that exists, of which the women can get $2 million if they win. What is all the money that exists for the men's team? I can't quite actually remember the number.
Well, hold on. The $4 million is if they win. So that's what the federation gets. If the men win, they get $39 million. They get $39 million. So the winner of essentially, this is what it comes down to. The winner of the men's tournament gets more than all the prize money for the women's tournament.
So all the prize money that exists for winning for the women is $4 million, of which the women's team would get 2.
Yes, but that's if they won the tournament.
If they win the World Cup, yes.
Yeah.
If they win the World Cup. If the men win the World Cup, the total amount of money that exists is $39 million.
Yes, correct. That's
is significantly more than 4.
Yes, and the men's team would get 9.
9, which I'd like to point out is a significantly smaller fraction than 2/4.
Yes.
9/39 is less than 2/4. See what I did with those wonderful math skills I just did just now? Whoa. The settlement is contingent on ratification between new contract between soccer and the women's team, and also incidentally the men's team. When finalized, it would resolve all. I don't know how this works. I don't know how the men are. Is it too early in the morning for me to say cocked? How they have been cocked to this much that they are willing to give up claims to a $9 million prize pool if they win the World Cup, which would be a bit of a notable event given the strength of competition in the men's World Cup.
Well, you know what? Reading through this now makes me think this isn't over.
No, I mean, how
can't be over.
It wasn't an easy process to get to this point. I wouldn't think. Said the U.S. soccer president. The most important thing is we're moving forward and moving things together. The settlement represents an unexpected victory. Yes, it does. I don't quite understand what's going on
when
here.
Everybody believed you were losing, right? There's absolutely no way you could possibly win. Yeah, it's a very surprising, very, very surprising.
Nearly 2 years after losing the court in a devastating ruling, they were able to not only extract the 8-figure settlement, but also commitment to enact the very reforms the judge had rejected, because the reforms, at least in the judge's opinion, and in my opinion, and in your opinion,
and anybody who reads the shit, and anybody who reads it would. That's what it comes down to. Just read the documents. It says it. It literally says it there.
Just read it. Just read it and read the facts and read what's going on. And what we set out to do was have acknowledgement of discrimination from U.S. Soccer and receive that through back pay. And we set out to have fair and equal treatment and working conditions. Now, as to the working conditions aspect, that was a separate part of the lawsuit from pay. That also was settled. And I'm not going to speak to that aspect of it because it did seem like there was some discrimination there. For example, it seemed like their hotel rooms were vastly different. It seemed like the men would get these charter private flights and the women, I think, were flying coach. Maybe they're flying first class, but they were distinctly not even in sort of the other aspects. So, I mean, there were some distinct differences there in terms of the support, logistics, housing, and it seemed like, at least in some situations, the women were getting a very raw deal in terms of the support. So there seemed to be some validity to at least some of that. But in any case, that settled long ago. So it doesn't really matter for the purposes of our discussion. For my discussion today, I'm only talking about the pay issues. If you want to say that the accommodations or support or other aspects, hotels, flights, were unequal, then I'm not going to fight with you because I don't know enough to have a strong enough opinion, although it seemed like the women were getting screwed. But on the pay issue, it never made any sense to me.
Well, the pay issue was the big money issue. The other issue, see, I think, and you have to give credit to which credit's due. There's good lawyering and there's good arguments. Good lawyering is, we know we have this issue of the accommodations is a real issue. So if we tie this with the equal pay issue, it's going to make it more likely that the equal pay issue will fall right into line, because it just makes you're already discriminating against one, or it looks like you are. So now we're going to, it's easier to roll into, except I think the equal pay one, oops, let me stop this. The equal pay one, if it was on the borderline, I think it goes through. But since it was so obviously wrong, then that's what kind of stopped it and was like, okay, you got this one, but this other one is just ridiculous. You know what I mean?
Now, finally, we get into the meat of this, which I've been alluding to for a little bit at this point, but we can actually read it. And here's where kind of the rubber meets the road on all this. In exchange for the pay, and also I'd like to note we're like 10 paragraphs deep by the time the rubber meets the road in the New York Times, but whatever. In exchange for the payout and U.S. Soccer's pledge to address equal pay in future contracts with its two marquee teams, the women's players agreed to release the federation from all remaining claims in the team's discrimination suit. Yes, that's how a settlement works. And then it goes on to say sort of the big drop here, the big shoe dropping. The process could take months. The men's and women's team have already held joint negotiation sessions with U.S. Soccer, but to make the deal work, the federation is seeking a single collective bargaining agreement that covers both national teams. The Men's Players Association would have to agree to share or surrender millions of dollars in potential World Cup payments from FIFA, soccer's World Cup body. These payments set by FIFA and exponentially larger for the Men's World Cup than the corresponding women's tournament are at the heart of the equal divide. And then it said, Cohn, a former member of the women's team, said in September the federation would not sign an agreement without team that did not equalize the pay money. This is exactly what I've been saying. As a practical matter, you've been saying it's just the economics are simply not there, Nate.
Yes, they just aren't, and they never were, and the women's national team knows that. And you know, this scam is multi-layered, because women's soccer, let's just call it what it is. It's not. I gotta say it slowly. It's not as profitable as men's soccer. Oh my God. Shocking, right? It's just like in the NBA is very profitable, but the WNBA is not as profitable.
Now, Nate, could that profitability in any way be related? And I know correlation is not causation, but could that profitability be in any way related to the general public's general interest in the relative sports? Could it be based on the popularity of those sports? For example, you know, it's basic economic principles 101, right? Supply and demand principles. There's only so much soccer to go around, and there's only so much stadium space, and there's only so much other of limited resources. And if more people want to watch those things, or more eyeballs want to watch those commercials, then they'll be more expensive. And so it would be based on popularity. Or am I getting my basic fundamental economics wrong?
Kurt, let me just explain it just simply, right? This is just explaining simply. The reason why most people want to see the top players in the world, no matter if they're men, women, whatever, right? And the top players in soccer happen to be people like Ronaldo, right? Messi. Those people who are the top people. If they were to play in the U.S. Women's Soccer League, they would dominate like no one else ever. So what happens is people want to see the best at the business. Now, I'm not saying the women's soccer isn't marketable and isn't profitable, but based on the numbers, right? Let's not pretend if FIFA could charge $200 per ticket for the women's team, they would say, no, we're not going to charge that money.
This is always a good question. Did FIFA forget how to be greedy? This is always a good question. Right. Yeah. So yes, Nate's right. If they could charge $200 a ticket, if they could charge $2,000 a ticket, would they? Yes.
Yeah.
So why aren't they charging $2,000 a ticket? Why aren't they charging $20,000 a ticket, Nate?
Because the market realities.
The market won't support that?
Yeah. There are market realities that I think people just don't realize. And those market realities say, well, we can't pay that much. And at the end of the day, this is what it's going to come down to. The men are probably not going to win the World Cup, but they may make the World Cup. And will they now agree to give up? Because let's say just for making the World Cup, the men were going to be owed more money than if the women win the World Cup, right? Not even talking about advance, just making the World Cup. And if they make it to the next round of the World Cup, then round of 16, they'll double what the women could have ever made in the World Cup. So now the men are going to have to give up half of that, playing against Messi, playing against Ronaldo, right? We're playing against the best men in the world, the best players in the world. And we're going to have to give up that for them playing against some women from Qatar or some women who they just got from the side of the road and said, hey, come play for the national team, and let the U.S. women beat them 20-0 and say we should be paid. We should pay them the same for beating Taiwan 40-0 as we losing to Messi 1-0. That's what they're saying we should be. That's ridiculous. And the men's national team, they know. But I honestly think now, after reading all this, I think this is all politics. I think the president, Cone, wants to stay president. And the only way she could do
why
that
would the men, why would the men ever agree to this, Nate? Because
they're not. They can't. It's ridiculous.
This is the only way. This is the only way it makes sense. This paragraph that we finally got in paragraph 12 or whatever by the time of the New York Times is the only way this makes sense. It's the only way for it to work, because you have to equalize the economics. That's the only way for it to work. The only way to equalize the economics is essentially to treat them as one big team. And then you can equalize the economics. But then why would the men ever agree to that? Because, the men, if they win the World Cup, suddenly they're like, well, here's your much, much smaller payout. But they're like, but we had to work all that much harder and the women are essentially getting paid for our success.
Yeah. And if the women win everything, we get half. But the interesting is the men who suck, if the women win, they're going to get half of that, right?
Yeah.
Hold on. Let me take this call. I'll be right back.
All right. So Nate will be right back. So yeah. So this whole thing is just so weird, because why, if you're a right thinking man, would you agree to this? If you're a man and you're also willing to take a lot of risk as a man, because you were willing to do this whole pay for play thing and you're willing to take that risk. And now suddenly it's like, okay, now suddenly you have to take this other deal. But why would you ever agree to that? Because your upsides are so much better. Why would you agree as a man that all your hard work, if the US if the US national team, US men's national team wins the World Cup, it will be as a result of a lot of hard work. And that might be possible someday. Soccer is growing in the United States. Austin, for example, has a new soccer stadium, I should say, to be a little bit clearer. But yeah, I mean, soccer is growing in the United States, and it is possible someday, maybe someday soon, depending on the relative growth of things, that the U.S. men's team will win the World Cup. We attract all the best talent from all the rest of the world and basically all the other things. So why not soccer too? Once we have enough baseline to reach a certain tipping point, one would imagine that USA soccer will accelerate and we'll suddenly be the best in the world at that too. Just like we're the best at, basically everything else. And if that ever happens, the men would have to say, all that money we just learned, all that $40 million we just weren't won from the World Cup, the $40 million we got through our hard sweat tears of having to beat and be the winners of the men's World Cup, we're going to have to split that basically evenly with the women's team. Why would the men ever agree to this? I don't know, but it's the only way for the economics to work out. And it's hard to believe in some senses that the U.S. National Federation has settled this without some sort of agreement by the men to do it. I mean, the men are not party to this lawsuit, so they don't need to have an agreement for the purpose of settling a lawsuit. But the question is, how are they going to get the men on board? If the settlement is, we're going to make sure that you get a piece of that pie, why would the men agree to this? I don't know. It doesn't quite make sense. I don't understand it. So Cone, who is the current president of the federation, I believe. Yes, Cindy Parlow Cone is the current president of USA Soccer. Okay. So Cone, who is the president of USA Soccer, also a former member of the women's team, said in September the federation would not sign a new collective bargaining agreement with either team that did not equalize World Cup money. Why would the men agree to this? Why would the men agree to this? And even if the men did agree to this, would they really fight as hard for it? Because the upsides are much lower. I mean, would you really, really fight tooth and nail to win the World Cup if your upsides were dramatically limited because you had to give just a huge chunk of that money to other players who didn't even play in the same competition, the Men's World Cup? On Tuesday, the Players Association for the women's team congratulated its members and their lawyers on a historic success in fighting decades of discrimination perpetuated by U.S. soccer, but made clear that they plan to hold U.S. soccer and, by extension, the men's team to public promises to support equal pay. Again, this is the only way this works. It's just the economics of it. The men's team wins $40 million if they win the Men's World Cup, of which they would get $9 million. That was the deal. The women's team wins $4 million if they win the Women's World Cup, of which they get 2. So they get a much bigger fraction, 50%, than 9 out of 39, which is roughly a quarter. But that, there's a lot more money. Also, there are tournaments that men play in because there are things that are sort of comparable in some sense to the World Cup in terms of tournaments that can at least be spoken of as something in the same breath, various tournaments that are comparable. And many of those tournaments pay, although pay much less, obviously. They pay for the men's tournaments, but don't pay for the women's tournaments, because the women's tournaments aren't as popular. And so the men are now going to have to compete at these other tournaments. And part of their winnings are going to go to players who don't play in those tournaments either, because it's the only way for the economics to work out. It's just an economic reality. The players' long battle with USA Soccer, which is not only their employer, but also a federation that governs the sport in America, has thrust them into the forefront of a broader fight for equality in women's sports. I assume that the lawsuit from the WNBA will begin any moment now. Maybe the men's NBA will be happy to share some of their salaries with the women's teams. Maybe Kobe and Grant and other players of the men's basketball, maybe they'll be happy to give up many millions of dollars of their contracts to the Women's National Basketball Association. I look forward to seeing how that lawsuit goes at some point in the future. Kobe's dead. Yeah. I mean, I don't follow sports, as I mentioned, so I just picked the first name off the top of my head. Sorry. Yeah, as I mentioned, I don't follow sports, so it was the first name that came to my head. Apologize. In recent years, players, teams, and even athletes in other sports, ice hockey Olympic gold medalists, Canadian soccer pros, WNBA, have reached out to the USA Players and Union for guidance on winning similar games and warning conditions. Yep. Many of those players and teams succeeded in winning major games. Norway, Australia, and Netherlands are among countries whose soccer federations have committed to closing the pay gap between men and women, even as the USA case dragged on. Well, I can't speak very intelligently to Norway, Australian, or Netherlands law. Also can't speak quite as intelligently to their economics, although I'd imagine they're at least comparable. But I'm right. They've also agreed to this, apparently. The Norway, Australia, and Netherlands, who are not U.S. and don't have U.S. laws and U.S. values and stuff like that.
They have agreed. I heard the Kobe Bryant comment too. I'm like, damn, this guy's still talking about Kobe Bryant. Kobe Bryant.
Sorry, it was the first pass. Okay, well, I guess it says something of value that it was the first. It was the first basketball name that came to my head was Kobe.
Yeah.
So I guess his legend lives on. Is the only value I can have because you're like, yeah, he died. It's like that's right, he died in that helicopter accident. I remember now, but it was the first name that came to my head. So
I hear that.
Insert other name of choice in this sentence. The equal pay fight began almost 6 years ago when 5-star players filed a complaint with the EEOC, accusing U.S. soccer of wage discrimination. The women, key members of a team that at the time were reigning World Cup and Olympic champions, claimed they earned as little as 40% of what players on the men's national team were paid. Now, I'm going to say this again because I don't know why I have to keep repeating it, but I'm going to try. I'll just keep saying. Discrimination on the basis of sex is predicated on the discrimination being on the basis of sex.
Oh no! Did you just say that? No,
Yes.
It's craziness. It's crazy.
If you're discriminating for reasons other than sex, you're not discriminating for sex because you're discriminating for reasons other than sex. There are many legal ways and many legal reasons to discriminate. There are many, for example, many of you have discriminated by making Nate the Lawyer a much more popular channel than mine. Because apparently in your discriminated judgment, you think Nate the Lawyer is a better channel than Uncivil Law. This discrimination makes me sad. I wish it was not true. However, this discrimination is not illegal. The collective will of the internet has said that Nate the Lawyer's presentations are better, more interesting, funny, more insightful. They like him better. I don't know. But that's the collective judgment of the will of the YouTubes.
That's what they say about legal compared to mine, right?
Yes, that's what they say about legal compared to yours, right? And so if I want to grow to be as big as Nate the Lawyer, because he's my competition, or he's at least my competitor, because I think it's not necessarily a one-for-one competition, because I think we can all grow. Yeah. Then one of the things I could do is look and say, hey, why is he successful? And maybe I could do some of those things, and maybe I'd be more successful. But I can't, sue you guys, the chat, or I can't sue Nate's chat. I can't sue the Brody bunch over here for their rampant discrimination on the basis of race. That's what it is. They're discriminating on the basis of race because I'm white and you're black. Or it could be, Nate, that maybe you're producing a better product than me. Maybe that's the reason.
Yeah, you know what? And the one thing is that sometimes it's not even about the intangibles. Sometimes it's about topics, right? Like Recchietta. We all covered Rittenhouse. Yeah. It blew him up, right?
It blew us all up.
Yeah, but I think it blew you guys up. For my blow up happened
blown up, Nate.
From U.S. Soccer. U.S. Soccer blew me up.
There was a time when we were about paired. Around the 20,000 mark of subscribers, we were running even. And then you blew up mainly because of soccer, which, fine. And, it's good for you. I'm not, it's like, well, you got your big break. And so that's great. And my grow has been more steady and slow, but, we're making it. And
and what you do is sometimes you just need that one story. Like Viva's now blowing up because of the trucker stuff. Yeah, that's right. So everybody kind of has that story, and yours was actually the you had a little bump with, but it wasn't a big enough story with the Toddy Westbrook lawsuit thing because you had a lot of success there. But the point about discrimination is some discrimination. I'm going to say it is legal. Is legal, as you're saying. For instance, if for jet pilots. Right, there's a height requirement. You got to be 6'2" or maybe 6 foot tall. Why? Because if you're under 6'1" or 6 foot, you can't reach the pedals to pilot the goddamn thing. So there's a height requirement. Well, if you're going to be a pilot, you have to meet this height so you can fly the damn plane. Legal discrimination, right? Legal discrimination,
right?
So discriminate, and even sometimes with gender, there's a discrimination based on gender that you see every day of the week. Is going to the restroom, right? You can't go to. I can't go to a woman's restroom, right? I'm being discriminated. If the men's restroom is full, I'm being discriminated.
I bet you can in New York. I bet you can.
Some places, yeah, but sometimes. But But that's what I'm saying. What I am telling you guys is that the problem here is that they made a great case for discrimination for the men's team, right? They made a great case for discrimination for the men's team. But they made a great case. And again, this is what I like talking about legal tactics. The tactics they used, they had a shit case. But the tactics they used, they knew their argument wasn't to a jury in a courtroom. It was to people like you who are watching this video to convince this regular person on the couch, pay these women their money. That's who they were talking to, and that's why they got paid.
Yep. The numbers speak for themselves, Solo said. Men's players, Solo said, get paid more just to show up than we get paid to win major championships. That's true. The question is why? Why do they get paid more just to show up?
No. Let's just be clear. They get paid for not showing up. The women get paid for not showing up. See, and that's the kicker. They don't want to say, we get paid for just being alive. They at least have to show up. Just imagine you got a coworker who's getting paid not to show up while you have to show up. That's what she's actually should be saying. She was like, well, hey, you know what? Even if we don't show up, we get paid, but they got to show up. And when they show up, if they can get paid, then they'll get a little bit more money. But we get paid regardless. That's the piece that we're missing.
Absolutely. Almost immediately, soccer fans took side in the fight, cleaving U.S. soccer down the middle. I'm not a soccer fan, but I took a position based on the law.
Yeah.
The Federation briefly argued that men brought in more money and drew higher television ratings, and thus deserved higher pay, but soon abandoned that stance amidst public backlash, player fury, and a closer reading of the equal pay law. This is a completely tenable argument. They abandoned tenable arguments because of backlash, right? The Federation did, in fact, argue in their early briefing that men brought in more money because of higher television, and thus there's more pay. And
because people don't like facts. That's the problem. People don't like facts. They said, here are the facts. The facts are, you put the men's World Cup championship versus the women's World Cup championships. The men World Cup championships will win every time, twice on Sunday.
And it's just based on people. It's based on people. More people want to go to the games in person. The tickets are more expensive. More people go to the games in person. More hot dogs are sold. More people want to watch the game on television. The ads can sell for more. More people want to buy their merchandise. There's more merchandise money. And so forth and so on. It's just economics. It's not even completely complicated economics. More people want a thing. There's scales of revenue, and that are just completely different based on popularity. So if it's biased, it's biased on the viewing public, but you can't equalize that. You can't force people to go to games they don't want to go to, or prevent them from going to games they don't want to go to because of the economics. I mean,
yeah.
So I chide the lawyers for the soccer federation for abandoning this line of argument, because this shows a basis of discrimination that is other than on the basis of sex. Here's one of the reasons we're discriminating. They bring in more money. There's more television ratings, which means more ad revenue. So we're not. I don't know why they abandoned this line of argument.
But the great part about it is, even abandoning this, their argument was still a winner. This is their best argument. But even abandoning this, it came down to, guess what? We still paid them more. We paid them more money overall and per game, right? Their rate of pay was higher. We paid them more money. I think a lot of people don't realize how crazy this is for them to abandon a winning argument. This argument will win with the WNBA. It'll win anywhere else. They said, we're not going to use that argument. We're going to use our B-level argument. And that was still a winner. That's where we're at right now. That's how bad this case was for the women.
Let's read these three paragraphs so I can rant about this for a second. Later depositions produced uncomfortable exchanges that the public relations savvy women's players weaponized on social media and in slogans they said on t-shirts. But they also produced statements the players would not forgive. In March 2020, months after the women's team won its second straight Women's World Cup. U.S. Soccer's lawyers argued in a court filing that playing for the men's team required more skill and responsibility than the women's equivalent. Quote, to see that blatant misogyny and sexism as the argument used against us is really disappointing, Rapinoe said, adding that, I know we're in a contentious fight, but that crossed the line. Now, Nate, is it misogyny? Because apparently the answer is yes. Is it misogyny for me to take note that men's players and women's players have different physical skills and are playing in different physical games? Is it misogyny for me to note, as the Williams sister did, that the men and women's tennis are different games because of the nature of men and women? Biological is that misogynist? Am I a misogynist for saying that the men's team requires a higher degree of skill because they're in a higher degree of competition, which seems to be objectively, demonstrably true, as I take note that the women's team has, for example, on 2 different occasions lost to a group of 14-year-olds or a group of 15-year-olds, or has lost to a single man playing against them once?
Well, listen, let me just...
Is that misogynistic, Nate? Am I a misogynist now?
Let me just be clear. If they are talking, and for people who like basketball or baseball, let's bring it back to the WNBA, right? Let's say LeBron James goes to the WNBA. Any team he goes to, I believe that team is going to win the championship, right? Any team you put LeBron James from the NBA, or Kevin Durant, right? Those are the 2 best players in the NBA. You put them on any WNBA team, that team is the favorite to win it all, right? That team is going to win it all. But can you do that in the reverse? Can you matter of fact, I'll say take the top 5 of the best WNBA players in the world and put them in the NBA. They probably won't be able to make
it probably even wouldn't require a top man, but you could require a top man from a rec league in basketball and probably be assured to win the women's national championship in basketball. Now,
the thing now this is the big lie, and they like to call the election thing the big lie, which is a lie in of itself. But
there were a lot of lies there, and I said as a Republican, there's a lot of bullshit on the right.
But
that's fine.
The big lie here is that winning the women's World Cup is exactly the same as winning the men's World Cup. That's a lie. That is not true. No one with any sense would even think that that's true. But that's what the women want to say. So that's why when the U.S. Soccer just put it on paper, like, held on, winning the men's World Cup is an extremely different thing than winning the women's World Cup. They were called misogynists. But that fact is true. So you take this, clip it, that fact is true. Give me the best women from all teams, and I bet you they wouldn't even be able to qualify for the junior World Cup. Junior men's World Cup. That's what I'm talking about.
On a purely literal level, if it's not true, why don't the women just compete in the men's World Cup? If it's not true that it requires any more skill or any more whatever, why don't the women just compete in the men's World Cup? Because they've won the women's World Cup, and if it doesn't require any more skill, that means by the transitive property, they would win the men's World Cup. So why aren't they competing in that, Nate? Is it because possibly, men and women athletes are not, in fact, exactly the same in every possible way? And there's the reason that we created the men and women's categories in the first place, because the biological realities between men and women are not the same. And that makes me a misogynist for noting that. Apparently the least misogynist thing for me to do would say, let's just abolish the men and women's teams altogether and let's let them all play together. Because then I'm not saying that the women are any less. They're exactly equal to. The women are exactly equal to the men in every way. So let's abolish the categories altogether and let them play together.
Yeah. You know what? I'm all for that. If we're talking about they should be paid equally, then there should be no men's and women's leagues. They should be all the same, and to the best person wins. But we know that's not going to happen. We know that's not going to happen. So we separate them, and then we say, okay, the best woman versus women. And just so everybody also understands this too, there is no barrier to gender to compete on the men's team. There's no barrier to compete in the NBA for if a woman was as good as LeBron James, they're not saying no, you can't play in the NBA. Matter of fact, they'll allow you to play.
I would think they'd be so happy to sign you. They would be so happy to sign you if you're that good. They would sign you so fast and make your head spin.
Yeah. It's not the men's NBA. It is the NBA. So if you could play in the NBA, they would bring on the team, right? Most of them, it's crazy. So there is no barrier to getting into any of the men's leagues because they aren't the men's leagues. They're just the leagues. The women's leagues are the ones who are discriminatory. Those are the ones that say men cannot play in those leagues. But the men's leagues, anybody can play. That's why Division I football. When women want to play, they'll have a woman kicker and she'll come on the field and play. There's no barrier for gender. So this notion that women are being discriminated against because they're women is not true. It's the men who, that's why you have this whole big transgender issues like with the swimmer. The guy wants to go, he goes and swims and win and breaks all the records for winning, right? Breaks all the.
I'm like normally in swimming, we have to break up the ultra stopwatches, with the 2 digits of precision, because of how close it is with the thing. It's like I don't need a stopwatch, man. I need an hourglass. Holy God, how long is this going on? With the difference between these things. How long was that gap in that? Was it like 20 seconds?
It was like the guy was just chilling. Like, oh my God, I finished the race like an hour ago, and these women are still swimming. That's what we're talking about. Yeah. And that person has been on estrogen, has been suppressing their testosterone, and still is blowing them out. So again, this is not about discrimination. This is just about reality.
Why? I ask you because maybe you disagree, but maybe you're the furthest left of the law tubes.
Go ahead. I'm pretty far left, yeah.
So maybe you can explain to me from a lefty perspective why me saying that women's skill level is not the same. Why is that misogynist? Because
it's true. See, the problem is facts. Facts, or it's not about facts. It's about feelings. Us saying that women and men are different. And women are physically stronger because of all these aspects of that we all know, testosterone, broad shoulders. It's a refactive reality. Yeah. But there's a psychological, that makes me feel bad. It makes me feel bad, right? So it's like, well, hold on, you're playing against, matter of fact, somebody was arguing about me about the women's national team the other day, and I said, well, do me a favor. Name some women, some famous women's soccer players. So they have Rapinoe, this person. No, I said, no. Those are American soccer players. Name one other one that's not American. Name one. Just name one. And you'll win. I'll say we win. And I said, here, I'll give you an example. Ronaldo, Messi, I'll just name a couple. Pele, God damn it, from the 80s. Just name a couple. Just name me one other women's soccer player that that's not from the U.S. team. And the person said, well, this is a got me question. Yeah, it's a gotcha question because you know why? Because there's probably none. You can't name them because it's not possible. And the reason why is because they're 2 different sports. Now, you can't expect one sport that's making $6 billion and another sport that's making $300 million and say we should get paid the same. Think about this. It's essentially this is what the U.S. soccer has to get over. They're sending 2 teams to win 2 tournaments. Let's not even think about the men's and women's team. They're sending one team to win a tournament that's got $6 billion in revenue and it's paying out $39 million to the winner. That team goes, and if that team wins that tournament, then they send another team to win a tournament that only has $300 million, and that only pays the winner $4 million. And the team goes out there and wins that tournament. It wins. Hey, we won the tournament. We won $4 million. Now we want to be paid as if we won the tournament that had $39 million. That's essentially what's going on here. That's why I don't think this agreement's going to last. And that's the reason why I think at first when I saw settlement, all this is good. But you know what? There's no settlement here because unless the men are going to be so stupid to say, We'll give up those millions and millions of dollars that we deserve to have for beating the best in the world, and give it to the women who are beating people who they're picking up. Just come play soccer one day and let's see how it works, right? Because most we are the country. The United States is a country that are putting all of this money into women's soccer. But that's not happening in Saudi Arabia. That's not happening anywhere around the world. No place is investing in women's soccer as we are. It's a fringe sport everywhere else except for here. And that's why our women
maybe it'll grow.
It.
Maybe it'll grow and become a bigger thing internationally. I mean, there's been some indication of that, at least a little bit. So, hey, who knows what the future will hold.
It may be great, but right now, the team in Uruguay, right? Put the men's team from Uruguay in the women's national team tournament. I bet you they'll win every time. Right?
Yeah.
They'll win every time. Yeah, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
But the women's team from Uruguay, I don't think they could
put a man from the men's national team against the entire women's team, and let's see how it works out.
Yeah.
I don't know. U.S. Soccer apologized and replaced its legal team, because of the uncomfortable truths in there. Baylor Federation president resigned.
I'll be back. Let me just pick up my clothes.
Sure,
I'll be right back.
He's picking up clothes, guys. So, hey. The settlement has seemed like the most likely way out for the side since April 2020. No, the most likely way out seemed like a decision against the women's soccer team, but okay. When the judge in the women's lawsuit, R. Gary Klausner of the United States District Court for Central District of California, dismissed the argument that they were systemically underpaid and said the U.S. Soccer had substantiated its claim the women's team had actually earned more on both cumulative and average game basis. Yeah. Also as a percentage of overall revenue or percentage of overall percentage of overall receipts, something like that. The women were paid like 1% more as a percentage of overall gross revenue or something like that as well. So even when you calculated it out as a percentage of total amount of revenue that the soccer federation brought in, the women were 1% better than the men in terms of total percent. Also, incidentally, for what it's worth, the women's agreement said explicitly, among other provisions, they couldn't get a lower percentage of overall revenue than the men's. So, but the men's didn't have that agreement, by the way. So there was also another guarantee on top of all the other guarantees for the women. So there was a guarantee that they would not get less as an overall percentage on top of everything else. And they didn't. They got actually about 1% more of it. The women's team had, in one of the cases, great ironies, become a victim of their own success. In choosing to fight the U.S. Soccer while they were at the peak of their powers as world champions, the women had also picked the absolute worst time to line up a few years of their salaries against a few years of men's pay at the time they're foundering competitively. Well, it didn't really matter what time period you looked at. Also, wouldn't you measure for the relevant time period of the relevant time contract? And again, it's just an issue of they had different structures because they wanted different structures and different pay because they wanted different pay. And I guess by failing to qualify for the only men's World Cup played during the lawsuit window, the men became ineligible for millions of dollars in performance bonuses, even as the women collected bonuses twice for winning their World Cup and won higher pay after successfully negotiating new contracts. They negotiated those contracts. The women vowed to appeal the judge's ruling and the deal over working conditions. Single compromise was possible. On working conditions, sure. And from my limited understanding of the working conditions were demonstrably worse. Even accounting for revenue issues, they were just demonstrably worse. So I think it seemed like a more fertile ground of analysis than on the pay issue. At the time, the current Federation president, Cohn, who was a former women's national team member, had restated her persistent optimism. A larger deal could help put the fight behind them. It was a hope that sides could build a different relationship. And I guess that's the end of the article from the New York Times in all of its glory. But yeah, the fact that there was a settlement in this lawsuit is disappointing for the legal analysis. I was, as Nate was, looking forward to a decision from the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, who might have tried to overturn the judge's decision. And there was some kind of like maybe some grounds that they could kind of do as sort of a cheat. Like they could send it back for further analysis, even though it's not really warranted, because maybe there's sort of like a, there was some minor problems, I thought, at least in my own humble opinion, in the judge's decision on the district court level. I thought overall it was solid, but there were some minor issues that, the Court of Appeals could potentially leap onto and say, like, there's needs to be further things to prolong the litigation rather than like, really make a decision on the merits. So kick the can down the road. So there was that possibility as well, that this could have, been reversed on these very sort of minor grounds, which would have ultimately presumably led the district judge to basically reissue their decision with those minor issues solved. And then we'd be exactly where we are now, maybe 2 years from now. Of course, there's also the possibility that the Ninth Circuit wouldn't do that they'd actually adjudicate on the merits either way. Either they'd say, yes, the district court was just wrong, or no, the district court was just right. And then, of course, we could be off to appeal at the United States Supreme Court. But now we're going to be deprived of those arguments. Now we're going to be deprived of that analysis. It would have been interesting to watch the Ninth Circuit try to make a reasoning that overturned the district court on the merits of the thing, rather than on these sort of minor sort of technical aspects, right? There's like enough here to just kind of like sink my teeth into to avoid the issue. So, but it would have been interesting if the Ninth Circuit had tried to reverse on technical aspects. Like they said, or on the merits rather, that this was really a bad deal. That the women were being discriminated on the basis of sex. And there were some comments, incidentally, from USA Soccer and other people in negotiations. So there were some statements that could imply some sexist motivations. So there was that. And this is also one of the reasons why I thought USA Soccer was kind of dumb to drop the economics arguments and even drop the overall skill arguments, although I will agree with the criticisms of when the USA Soccer wrote those skill arguments, when they wrote about skill and responsibility, they didn't write it particularly well. They needed to write it with a little bit more care to avoid some of the more, it's not like that they had written it perfectly, that they would have avoided all the criticism, but the way they wrote it made it a little bit easier to attack the arguments for like misogyny rather than actually attacking the arguments, right? There was actually something kind of a little bit there, because the arguments that were written by USA Soccer when they were talking about the skill levels and responsibility levels of the two teams could have been written a little bit better to avoid some of the truth of the caricature. It could have been written a little bit cleaner. But I was disappointed that they didn't, stick with their arguments about the economics, and they didn't stick with the arguments about the relative skill levels of the competitions, because they're just not equal. They're not. And there's a way to make that argument on just a purely factual level and just say that these are just not equivalent. And you could point to the women's playing against like the teen 14s or the teen 15s or against single men or something to show as demonstratives. There's a way to write that. It could have been written a little bit better, at least in my humble opinion. But it doesn't seem like, I don't know how they get to settlement. I mean, they got to the settlement now. The women are going to be paid, this 20, what is it, $27 million? They're getting paid $24 million. The women are getting paid. So women are going to get this $24 million from nowhere, because it doesn't really exist. But okay, they're going to get this $24 million. But the only way for this to be economically viable in the long term is for the men to give up the money from their competitions that pay where the women's equivalents don't, and for them to give up a pretty huge share of any winnings from the World Cup. That's the only way for this to economically to work. Because the only other way to change this is to change the underlying reality of popularity. If the men and women's games were equally popular and people watched them equally and the economics were more equal, then yeah, to my mind, the economics of, and also another way to illustrate the point, of the economics, and also to illustrate the issue of the skill level. You don't even have to, you could just go to other sports, is another way to do this, by the way, in the briefing, which I think would have been clever. Right. What are there? 32 football teams within the NFL? Something like that? Something like that? All right. Are all 32 teams the same? Are all 32 teams' economics the same in the NFL? Are the Boston Ravens and the Dallas Cowboys and the Cleveland Browns and the Seattle Seahawks, are their economics the same? The New England Patriots, Miami Dolphins, are those economics all the same? Are the skill levels all the same? Is the popularity of their relative franchises the same? Do an equal number of people want to watch those games? Do an equal number of people want to go to those games in person? Green Bay Packers. Do an equal number of people want to buy that merchandise? Do an equal number of people want to watch it on TV? So the billing rights, so the advertising rates would be the same. Do an equal number of people want to buy hot dogs and hamburgers and sodas from the vending stands? Are these teams equal? Are the skill levels of these teams equal? Are they exactly the same? And the answer to that question is obviously no. And obviously the discrimination there is not on the basis of sex. Is the top player either the top player or the cumulative total of all players, take your pick, top player or the cumulative wages of all players, is that the same as between the Patriots, the Browns, the Seahawks, the Cowboys, the Dolphins, the Packers? Is it the same? The Rams? Is it the same? Is every top player the same? Are the teams as a combined whole the same? Are they paid the same? Is it because of sexism that they're just paid differently? Obviously not. So I think this is the way to make this argument, is by parallel construction. Is by saying, look, the men's teams and women's teams aren't the same, and neither are men's teams within their own terms. It's not discrimination on the basis of sex. The economics are different. It's not discrimination on the basis of sex. The skill level is different. The skill level between these various men football franchises are not equal. It's a different level of skill. It's even different when they're getting to the Super Bowl, because they play in different divisions to get to the Super Bowl, right? They play in different brackets, which are not necessarily equal. So even within the NFL or the NHL or the Major League Baseball, MLB, or insert your sport of choice in this sentence, the economics, popularity, skill levels are not all the same. And so I think you could have used that parallel construction, or the parallel examples, the parallel analogy, to show that the men's and women's teams here are different, and show the skill levels are different. It's not necessarily, we're not saying that it's because they're women. It's just a reality. I don't know what it's due to. And strictly speaking, I don't know it's because they're women. I don't, and neither do you. I mean, strictly speaking, you don't. I mean, I can just observe as a reality because I don't know why the skill level is different between the Packers and the Patriots and the Browns and the Dolphins. I don't know why. And the Rams, I don't know why it's different. It's obviously not based on sex. I don't need to know why it's different. I just know that it is different. And based on those different skill levels, those franchises come in with different money and win different things and get different rewards and so forth and so on. So, I mean, I don't know. Yeah. Yeah, there's a salary cap, but you can go under cap, right? And not every team is at cap, I'm sure. So yeah, there might be a total cap on total amount, but there's not. You can go under cap, and I would imagine not every team is at cap, and probably not every team is at cap because not every team's the same. If you told me that every single team in the NFL is at the cap, then I'd be surprised. I'm betting it's not true. So it's different products and different economics. Let me respond to a couple super chats. Let me go into the back end of YouTube real fast and take a look at some of your super chats you've been sending along the way. And thank you for everyone who has been sending super chats as always. I do appreciate you helping the support of the channel. Preston Whitmer gave me $5 and said, stuff like this is turning me into an actual misogynist. STFU FFS said for $2, as I'm wrong to be happy. Megan Rapinoe got cut. And Preston Whitmer gave me $5 to say, your arguments don't matter. It's bad faith. It's simply a matter of who has the whip hand. Simple as. Maybe, but it's trying to just look at it in any sort of way that makes any kind of sense on any sort of level, where we can be something that approaches logically consistent. Seems to me to be a good thing. So all that stuff. So yeah, I'm going to sign off for now. This is disappointing. It's settled. And I don't know that it's settled because I don't know the men are going to reach this deal. How will they? How will the men? And even if the men do reach the deal, won't it hurt their incentives to compete as hard as they can? Won't it take a little bit of oomph out of their fight if they know that at the end of the day that by winning the World Cup, they're not going to get all the money that they truly deserve? I mean, But I'm going to sign off for now. I'd like to thank my guest, Nate the Lawyer, who was tagged in the title. For those of you who are not familiar with Nate the Lawyer does some great coverage on many different things. Now he's going to have to find something else to talk about because USA Soccer is dead for the moment. Or is it, I guess? Maybe it will lurch out from the beneath. Or maybe now we'll get into some sort of WNBA versus NBA or equivalent in other things and so forth and so on. So yeah, all that stuff. But I want to thank my guest, Nate the Lawyer. Make sure to check him out if you haven't already. I've been Uncivil Law. Remember to please do all the YouTube things like comment, subscribe, hit the join button for 99 cents. You too can become an uncivilian, get a cool little icon by your name, help to support the channel financially, and during my batch record streams, you now get your name on stream. We fixed the issue, I think. So everyone now gets their name on stream if you donate 99 cents. That is the way that is your member benefit, is you get your name on stream during batch record sessions, which I believe you saw yesterday. So that is what you get. And that is updated monthly in terms of the batch records so that, they will be reflective as when they were recorded. I've been Uncivil Law. Until later, my friends, I hope all is well. Cheers and goodbye.